Hey everybody. That might be better. Hey everybody, this is John, coming with another Over the Reich. Got some feedback that it's just better to have these after the turns. You don't have to watch me move everything, and I think I would tend to agree. It's going to let me play it a lot faster and also give you more substantial information, of which there really isn't much for this turn. Turn 10, I made a couple minor little attacks here and there. Um, let's see here. Show you what I've killed. Oh, I only killed one Spitfire, one Hurricane, one Bullfighter, and one Sterling, and six B-17F. And a Sunderland. Yeah. All right, close that out. I did notice that he has an airfield right here. Um, I'm annoyed with myself that I wasn't checking every single turn for a construction worker to destroy along this path, so I did let him establish one here. Um, that's quite annoying. On the other hand, if I check for anti-aircraft, I do have Stukas that can probably kill them fairly easily in the open. It's when they get fortified inside of a city that you really have trouble with them. So as long as I can prevent this place from getting any kind of anti-aircraft, and I can just bomb uh, bomb the anti-aircraft here, then I'm going to be able to just strafe this very effectively, which I did this turn. I killed a Sunderland and I think like a Hurricane there. But that's really it for the most part there. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I am building, and then I'm going in my kind of defenses at this stage. And then I'll kind of get into some game mechanics that somebody asked about. So right now I only have 30 fighters really by day, and then a few Me-110s. I'm not sure how many are by day, but I think only like 4 or 5. So, I'm looking at like 35 total units that I can fight him off with during daylight. And that's just not going to be sustainable forever. Um, Other things that I would point out is that I don't think I have a very good chance in the Battle of the Atlantic. I've done a pretty poor job of it. In my playtests, sometimes I would build an aircraft carrier over at Nance and just kind of fill it with these Stukas and bring a couple 109s in. Um, haven't really bothered to do that in this one because ultimately I just don't know that I can put enough of a dent in the Battle of the Atlantic. And furthermore, he starts with some really developed cities, and it's just like it's a matter of time before he just builds everything up. Excuse me, even with the Battle of the Atlantic, if I had won it, he's still going to slowly but surely build up his forces. So I chose not to invest too heavily in it. But anyways, some folks did want to know a little bit about Test of Time patch project and just kind of the features in that. And I suppose I should talk about that a little bit because you know what, you might not even know what's new in that. I mean, much less over the Reich. If you're new to if you're new to Civ 2, or rather returning to Civ 2 after having played it 20 years ago, there's been a lot of changes. Let me see if I can just bring this up and show you a couple things. So let's take a look at the rules file here because some things have changed. The Test of Time patch project has this Cosmic 2 where they let you change a whole bunch of different things that are pretty cool. So like for example, in this scenario, I've decided that trade the freights and caravans would give you no gold whatsoever as a multiplier, and it would give you a ton of science. So you can really tweak it. So maybe you're just trading scientific knowledge, or maybe you're just trading gold and not scientific knowledge. So I could reverse this and have trade really mean trade just a money, or vice versa, or maybe it gives like a lot of money and a little bit of science, whatever you want to do. Impassable air. So there's impassable terrain, and I believe that impassable air overrides that. It makes it so that they can't move over impassable terrain, depending on if it's 0 or 1. And I don't remember exactly which does what, but air units can definitely travel over impassable air here in this scenario. So I assume 1 means that you're golden with that, and if it was a 0, they wouldn't be able to. Terrain defense for air, that's whether or not they ignore um, the terrain defenses as they normally do. So I have it set to 1, which means that they are not going to ignore it. Actually, that's how come if they're over clouds, it gives them a defensive bonus. Okay. City population loss, attack, and capture are two neat little features. So in the base game, unless you have city walls, if you attack a city that is unwalled, every single time you kill a unit, it's going to lose 1 population point. And a lot of times that's undesirable. So, you had a lot of scenarios in the past that had to be built with everything having city walls because otherwise the city might get destroyed and then you wouldn't have enough objectives and nobody could ever win. So this takes care of that. You can wall the cities that actually have them or need them. Um, and you can make it so that no cities will lose population attack if they're attacked. And the same deal with capture. Normally capturing a size 1 city without walls would destroy it. Uh, the patch project allows you to change that so that it's still around. Unit shield color, I'm not really totally certain what that is. I think it just changes the color of the shield somehow by various variables. No stack kills, that's really interesting, especially if you're a designer. If you ever built a scenario and just labored over adding fortresses to every single terrain square, maybe you did hex editing, maybe you use a utility that doesn't work anymore, you know what a pain in the butt that was. Personally, my scenarios tend to say, well, if you're stacking a unit, everything's going to die, and that's the way I design most of them. But many people don't. And so no stack kills. If I just change this to 1, it would mean that you could load up as many units as you wanted on 1 square, and you'd be fine. The reason why I didn't do that in this scenario is because then, what on earth would you do? You'd have one bomber stream just on 1 tile. You could have 1,000 bombers on 1 tile, which would be really hard to intercept, and really it would just ruin this scenario. That would not work here, but it might work for yours. Um, Event heap size. If you didn't want to use Lua and you wanted to use a macro text, that enables you to kind of increase how large the events can be. So you don't have to have multiple events in the del event file, as like Redfront did back in the day. Navigable rivers. So in this scenario right here, you're going to see I think this is a Seine, right? That river right there, I've just made ocean to make it navigable. You could also just have it be regular rivers, like in the base game, and ships could go up and down them. A couple little bugs that I found. I can't remember exactly what they are, but it works pretty well. Oh, you know what the bug was? You can't use the go-to command with it. See, in an earlier version of this scenario, I had rivers as kind of the rail track. I think I still do actually. The way that it looks this way is that it's using the river system for it, but it's just not navigable because if I didn't have this rail bed terrain that it's underneath, you'd have to move every single train manually, which was a real pain. So, um, types of terrain types, or number it rather, increases it from 11 to 16, so you get 5 extra terrain types to play around with. It's a little bit tricky to get it working at first, so I would just recommend that you kind of copy and paste rules from one scenario that does work to one that you're starting if you're having trouble. But the most common issue is that you just forgot to add this all to 16 because these numbers have to match how many terrains you actually have. No incremental rush by is something that I wish more designers would consider using for their scenarios. So if you've played a game like Imperialism or like New World Order or Iron Curtain or any of those ones that are really popular from a multiplayer perspective, you're gonna find that you spend so much time, or even just Redfront or something single player, you spend so much time, you know, rush building the cheapest unit, then rush building the next cheapest unit, and so on and so forth until you finally get to the unit that you want, because it's actually cheaper to do that in the base game that way. pain in the butt, takes forever. Every single player is going to do it anyways because it's how you min max and you get an advantage. If your opponent's doing it and you're not, you're going to lose. Okay. With this right here, you can just prevent that from happening. So if you rush build something, you cannot change the production to something else. I really like the feature. It's going to be in every single one of my scenarios going forward. It cuts back on time. And the less time that you have to spend, you know, doing quarter marshal duties, basically, as I think Agricola used to call them, rest his soul. It's better. It's a better player experience. So if you're designing a scenario, I really would encourage you strongly to use that. Um, Movement multiplier and railroad multiplier. Not totally positive what the first one does. I'd have to check. I believe the railroad multiplier means that, like in the base game, you have a situation where railroads units can travel indefinitely on them in a single turn. Um, and with this, you can tweak it so that there's an actual multiplier, just like a road or anything else. So I'm almost wondering if the movement multiplier is for road, railroad multiplier is for railroad, and rivers is for rivers, and then alpine is for like alpine units that have that flag. In this scenario, I've made road multiplier 1 simply because that's how you get the longest range for your air units. There's some quirks of Civ 2 scenario design, so that's probably what it is. Pretty confident of that. Production carryover, you can have it so that if in a case of like this scenario, you're disbanding trains to build better city, items or whatnot. And so there's some spillage of the shields that kind of carries over. And this little, the way I have it set up is that those shields will remain and carry on to the next unit. Because I figure, all right, so like if you were just rushing an ME109 and you built that and you had some extra parts, wouldn't they go to the next ME109? So that's why we have it in this scenario. Might be cases where you don't want that, and so you can change it there. Number of unit types is in my mind is huge. I want to say that Test of Time, just a base game, I think has 80 different unit types. So this substantially increases those, which, you can understand how that would help everybody. Capitalization limit, no idea what that is. I'd have to go look it up. And SDI defense, it's basically just changing, it kind of changes how powerful those are. And I think there's actually other Cosmic 2s. Like this is a la carte, so you can take what you want and put it in, and you don't need all of them. So I think this scenario actually started way back in the day as a macro event scenario. So that's why it has this. It probably doesn't need it, but then again, I might break everything if I remove it. So I'm just going to leave it because it's working now. Let's see. Oh, yeah, one other quick thing, just in the rules file, and then I'm going to wrap this video up. You notice these little numbers here are behind some of these improvements, but not others. This is also a patch project edition. And I forget which number means which, but what it basically does is you can now define, can somebody sell one of these improvements, first of all? So I do not allow them to, anything that's like one of the strategic bombing mechanisms can't be sold, all right? And it also has an option for, I think it is destroyed after a city is captured. So if there's a certain improvement that you only want one civ to have, and then the next civ gets it, that it gets destroyed, you can do that. And there's one third one, but the bottom line is it gives you a lot of control over what happens with these improvements. So for example, I've got a improvement in here called Wehrmacht, and what I really want to happen with this is that first of all, it only exists for one reason, and that's so that I can give it a cost of 3, or I think it's 3, yeah. I just wanted to cost the Germans money so that I can balance the fuel system a little bit, and because without it, they were just having way too much fuel and it wasn't really a struggle for them. So the explicit purpose of this improvement is just to cost money. That's all it is. It makes no sense whatsoever when the Allies capture a city that they should have it. So one of these two integers here, I think it might be that one, means that as soon as it is captured by the Allies, it will be destroyed. It will disappear from that city. They will not incur that cost. Um, so, you know, you can see there's the extra terrains and everything. But that's kind of it for right now. My thoughts on Tested Time Patch Project. I can do more on some quiet turns. Maybe I'll talk about more features of that or of the scenario. But hopefully that was helpful. I definitely encourage you to go and try the game out. Even if you don't like this scenario and you want to just play the base game, Patch Project is a good thing. I think there's a couple of mods. Like I believe Tech Mod might tweak a couple things with it, but he'd have to correct me if I'm wrong. And then, if you're not into World War II, there's also two other scenarios that use Lua. I built Caesar's Gallic Wars back in 2018 with Grishnak. That was the first scenario to use Lua. And then it's single player too, if you don't have a friend to play with. And then Too Tall in Nighttime built this absolutely outstanding scenario about Napoleon. Really, it's probably the best single player scenario that I've ever played. And I never thought Red Front was going to change that. But it's just go check it out. I mean, there's a forum on Civ Fanatics, but it has ranged units. It has this really cool diplomacy feature where, wars end for various reasons. Cities are restored to the control of the loser under different conditions. I mean, with Lua, you can do some really crazy stuff, and maybe I'll talk about that specifically on the next slow turn. But for now, I've got another one waiting to be played, so I'm going to go do that, and I'll catch you later.